Imagine you stand at the edge of the world your officers call safe. Imagine your boots grind into hard ground, and the leather of your scutum bites your forearm like an impatient animal. You see the Euphrates ahead, wide, cold, and honest. You feel the frontier behind you close like a door you never get to lock. The order snaps down the line. Pack, move, cross. Therefore the legion shifts from camp comfort into marching hunger in a single breath. You hoist rope with raw hands, fibers saw into skin. You feel the pontoon buck under weight and current. River water slaps your shins, climbs your thighs, steals warmth. The far bank waits, flat, unforgiving, and the moment your sandals find it, something inside understands. Rome stands on the wrong side of the map now. You look up and see Marcus Licinius Crassus ride past like money-given flesh. His escort gleams. His horse snorts, polished like a statue that breathes. You hear his confidence before you see his face, loud enough to drown out the small voice that asks why the richest man in Rome needs this war. But he rides as if the answer is simple. Glory tastes better when it is expensive. Therefore your feet move for someone else's hunger. A local guide steps forward. Smooth voice, quick eyes. He speaks of a shortcut, of water, of catching Parthians like thieves in an alley. You want to believe him because belief is lighter than doubt. You glance to comrades. Someone mutters, barely moving lips, a shortcut is a knife with a smile. The centurion barks you silent. Therefore you march anyway. The land beyond the river refuses to be conquered by discipline. You march day after day, but the ground eats your sandals and gives back blisters. Your waterskin shrinks like it feels shame for being empty. You chew grain that feels like gravel. Your jaw works like a millstone. Your tongue sticks to your teeth. But Crassus pushes forward because delay tastes like weakness, and weakness invites Rome to whisper his name without respect. Therefore the column stretches longer, thinner, more brittle with every mile. You see the baggage train lag. Mules stumble. Wheels sink into powdery soil. A man lifts a fallen sack and discovers it is lighter than promised. He looks around as if someone steals food with their eyes. Therefore arguments flare over handfuls of barley. A veteran breaks a biscuit and counts the pieces like coins. Another man tries to swallow too fast and chokes, then coughs until his eyes water. You feel your own hunger turn mean, no longer a complaint, but a knife that scrapes from inside. Scouts return with conflicting reports. Parthians ahead. No, south. No, thousands. No, more. Each report changes the shape of fear. You realize you are not being hunted by numbers. You are being hunted by uncertainty. Therefore, every dune becomes an ambush, every distant shimmer becomes cavalry, every silence becomes a drum you cannot hear yet. A Roman ally, King Abgar, the name passes down the ranks like a warning you do not fully understand, hovers near command. You see him lean in close, speak too softly. You see Crassus listen as if listening equals control. But when the air turns sharp, when your instincts start shouting, Abgar is gone at the exact moment you need him most. Therefore suspicion becomes a heat under the skin, but there is no target to strike. Form up. Centurions shove bodies into line. Shields knock shields. Men curse, then go quiet. The legion becomes a living machine, rank behind rank, iron discipline replacing panic. But the horizon answers with a sound the machine does not understand. Hooves. Not one charge, many. Not close yet. A low thunder that does not come from the sky. Therefore you brace, not knowing what braces against a storm made of horses. You reach Carrhae and the trap closes in real time. You expect an enemy line, a wall of flesh that stands still so Rome can break it. But you see Parthians appear, then refuse to hold still. They wheel. They glide. They slide along the edge of sight like predators that know you are slow. Their banners flick and vanish. Their helmets catch light, then disappear. Therefore your training, built to smash a stationary foe, begins to feel like a sword swung at smoke. A distant drumbeat grows. Not the deep rhythm of Roman feet. Lighter. Faster. It comes in pulses, like a heartbeat that belongs to something bigger than a man. You smell sweat under leather. You smell dust already rising. But still there is a moment, one thin moment, where you tell yourself the Parthians must come close eventually, because every enemy comes close eventually. Therefore you wait for the clash that never arrives. The first arrow volley arrives with a sound like rain on a roof, except the roof is your shield, and the rain is death. The scutum judders, your arm goes numb. You feel impacts punch through wood and hide. The arrows hum, then thud, then scrape as they slide off or stick. A man beside you grunts, surprised, and his knees buckle as if the ground suddenly becomes soft. You smell pitch, sweat, and panic in the same breath. Your commander orders the response you understand: advance. Throw pila. Close. Kill. Therefore you surge forward as one body. You feel the line press behind you. There is no room for cowardice, even if cowardice wants a room. You throw your pilum and watch it fly, heavy, honest, made for the moment of contact. But the enemy does not accept contact. The Parthians step back, still firing, always firing. Therefore your pilum lands in empty air or hits a horse that never stops moving long enough to die properly. You step forward again. More arrows. The scutum grows heavier as shafts stick and tremble. Your forearm burns. Your shoulder tightens into a knot. A man tries to pluck arrows out and breaks one, leaving a jagged stump that catches on tunics and skin. But every time you step forward, the Parthians float away like they are tied to the wind. Therefore the legion advances into exhaustion instead of victory. You try to raise your shield higher because arrows find the face. A shaft skitters along the rim and carves a line across a cheek. Blood runs hot and sudden. The man screams, then bites it down because screams waste air. Another arrow punches into a thigh. The leg collapses. You want to drag the wounded back, but if you break formation, the enemy finds the gap like water finds a crack. Therefore you leave a friend where he falls, and the shame tastes like metal. The Parthians feint. They pretend to flee, and your body screams to chase, because Romans are taught that enemies run when they lose. But the fleeing is a trick with teeth. Therefore, discipline wobbles. A few step out. Centurions shout. Shields bang in warning. But the Parthian riders turn in the saddle and shoot backward while fleeing, arrows still landing with impossible accuracy. You see a man take a shaft through the neck. He drops without drama, as if a hand turns him off. Then the cataphracts surge, armored riders, horses sheathed in metal, men wrapped in scales that flash and vanish. They do not drift like the archers. They punch. They drive. They aim for any gap that opens. Therefore, every time a Roman line flexes, steel floods in. You see a friend pulled from formation. He grabs at your shield rim, nails scraping wood, eyes wide with a question that has no answer. Horses crush him. Spear points finish the work. He disappears under armor and hooves, swallowed like grain under a millstone. You try to hold tight. The centurion roars numbers, curses, threats. The legion locks shields, trying to become a wall. But arrows keep falling and walls do not breathe. Therefore heat builds under helmets. Sweat stings eyes. Dust sticks to tongues. You feel your own breath shorten because panic steals air even when the lungs still work. A message runs along the line like a fuse. Crassus' son, Publius, leads a charge. Young, brave, too fast. The words move mouth to mouth, carried by fear pretending to be hope. He chases them, but that hope turns sour in seconds. He is surrounded. Then silence, worse than any scream. Therefore you strain to see beyond the forest of arrow shafts and shield rims, but the battlefield refuses clarity. You do not see Publius die. You feel it. The legion's spine goes cold, as if a giant hand squeezes the courage out through the ribs. The Parthians raise something on a spear in the distance, maybe a head, maybe a helmet. Your eyes cannot confirm, but your stomach believes it. And belief is enough to break men. The killing box tightens. Your formation becomes a cage you build for yourself. You cannot chase. You cannot retreat. You can only endure the hiss of arrows until your shield looks like a porcupine. Therefore your arm shakes from holding weight that never stops increasing. Your throat turns raw from breathing dust. Your lips crack. You taste blood you do not remember spilling. Someone shouts for a testudo. Shields rise overhead. Wood meets wood. A roof forms. For a moment the arrow storm becomes muffled, a distant drumming. But the roof steals air and sight. Therefore men stumble inside the shell, stepping on the fallen, tripping over bodies that are still warm. A wounded man cries out when a boot lands on his hand. He begs, but the formation cannot stop. The Parthians adapt faster than your officers can bark commands. They ride close enough to taunt, then retreat before steel reaches them. They keep distance as if distance is a blade. But the arrows never run out. You expect quivers to empty. You expect the enemy to slow. Instead, fresh arrows appear like a magic trick that never fails. Therefore the terror grows. A Roman can count his pila, can feel when his sword arm tires, but how does a man fight an enemy whose ammunition seems endless? Your sandals slide on loose ground. You look down and see it is not just dust. It is churned earth mixed with blood. But there is no time to grieve. A shout snaps you back. Therefore you tighten the line again, shoulder to shoulder, trying to become the thing Rome always becomes under pressure, unbreakable. A gap opens when a man drops. It is small, the width of a body. But on a battlefield, small is an invitation. Therefore a cataphract drives forward, lance level. You see the lance point tremble for a heartbeat, then punch into a shield and keep going, because the force behind it is a horse and armored man moving as one. The shield holder jerks backward, pinned, then collapses. You want to stab the rider, but the rider's armor turns your blade with a shriek. Therefore you aim for the horse, but the horse is armored too. The centurion screams to hold. A standard bearer grips the eagle so hard his knuckles pale. The eagle's wings do not move, but it feels like it watches. But your line is not a statue, it is flesh. Therefore exhaustion becomes betrayal. Knees tremble. Arms sag. A man's shield drops an inch, and an arrow finds the space and ends a life in the time it takes to blink. The hours blur. The enemy does not commit to a decisive clash. That is the point. They let time do the killing. Therefore you fight the sky as much as the riders, each arrow a piece of the air turned hostile. Your muscles burn from holding, not swinging. Your courage drains not in one heroic moment, but in thousands of tiny impacts. At last, the light starts to fade. Night approaches, and instinct whispers that darkness means relief. But relief is another lie. Therefore the Parthians keep pressure until the edge of visibility, then drift back, leaving you with the wounded and the dead and the terrifying sound of your own breathing. Night comes and it does not save you. The wounded moan. The dead are too quiet. You try to drink. There is nothing. You try to sleep. Your body refuses. Every shadow looks like hooves. Therefore men sit with backs against shields, staring into blackness as if staring can prevent movement. Someone whispers a prayer. Someone else laughs once, sharp and wrong, then clamps a hand over his mouth. Crassus calls officers. Word filters down that terms are sought. A meeting is arranged. You hear the word Parley, and it sounds like escape. But you also hear a sharper word, betrayal. No one knows which is true yet. That is the horror. Your life hangs on intentions you cannot see. Therefore even hope becomes dangerous, because hope can make a man lower his guard. Before dawn fully settles into day, movement begins, quiet orders, quick tightening of straps, then hauling the wounded who can still be hauled. You feel your muscles protest. They want collapse. But survival does not care what muscles want. Therefore you rise, lift, stagger. The column tries to slip away like a thief. But the land is open, and secrets cannot hide in open land. Some guides insist there is a safe route. Some officers argue. Voices rise, then cut off as if someone remembers the enemy is listening. Therefore the army's mind fractures into competing plans, and fractured minds make fractured armies. You do not know which route saves. You only know standing still invites arrows. The parley happens anyway. Crassus moves to meet Parthian leaders. You do not stand close enough to hear the words clearly, but you see gestures, hands out, then hands tightening. You see the nervous shift of horses. But something goes wrong, suddenly, violently. Therefore shouting erupts. Grabbing. A surge of bodies. The meeting collapses into chaos so fast it feels like a trapdoor. In the crush, leadership snaps like a dry branch. Someone yells that Crassus is down. Someone yells to protect him. Someone yells to run. You see a flash of steel, then dust, then arms pulling. You cannot tell whose blade does what. The fog of war swallows detail and leaves only outcome. Therefore the only truth that survives the moment is this. Crassus is dead and the army's head is gone. The effect is immediate. Orders lose authority because no one knows who owns them. Units drift. Men look at each other with the naked question of animals in a fire. Who leads now? But the Parthians do not need to kill every Roman to win. They only need to keep Romans confused long enough for the desert to finish the job. Therefore arrows return, and the retreat turns into a tearing cloth. You run, but running in armor is a bargain with pain. Your breath tears at your throat. Your calves cramp. You hear cries behind, and you do not know if they are calls for help or traps to slow you. Therefore you keep moving, because stopping is death and turning back is worse. Men vanish into the dust. Some fall and do not rise. Some are surrounded and pulled away alive, captivity, chains, a life that disappears eastward beyond the stories told in Roman forums. You see hands raised in surrender, then dragged down. You see a man spit at a rider and get struck for it. But you cannot know who lives long enough to regret surrender. Therefore you keep your sword close and your thoughts closer. Eventually the killing quiets, not because mercy appears, but because the battlefield runs out of organized Romans to shoot. Therefore silence becomes its own verdict. You stand among bodies, broken shields, snapped spears, arrows stuck in the earth like a crop that grows only death. You feel your arms shake, not from fear now, but from the delayed arrival of exhaustion. The cost reveals itself in fragments. A friend's sandal lies alone. A standard is missing. A man searches for his brother and finds only blood on a strap. But the greatest cost is not counted in gear. It is counted in the moment Rome discovers that discipline is not the same as adaptability. Therefore, the story of Carrhae burns into memory like a brand. You feel something else too, an ugly realization that arrives after the screams. This disaster is not only about arrows and horsemen. It is about a lie told at the beginning of the march. The lie says the enemy must fight by your rules. The lie says wealth buys immunity from geography. The lie says confidence is the same as competence. You return. If you return, not as a hero draped in loot, but as a warning encoded in flesh. You enter Roman streets and see people arguing over politics as if the world ends at the city gates. You watch merchants count coins as if coins stop arrows. You hear men praise boldness as if boldness bends reality. But Carrhae proves the opposite. The world does not meet you on your terms. Therefore, any leader who confuses desire with strategy walks the same road Crassus walks, even if the road is paved instead of dusty. Now the mirror turns toward the present. You see boardrooms that chase markets like Publius chases riders, fast, proud, certain the target must eventually stand still. You see institutions that assume rivals will play fair because fairness feels like a law of nature. But rivals adapt, move, refuse contact, drain resources, wait for mistakes. Therefore, modern Carrhae arrives as a slow hemorrhage, budget cuts, morale collapse, sudden resignation, a deal that turns into a trap. You feel it when a plan depends on the other side behaving politely. The verdict is simple, but it cuts. Arrogance does not beat adaptation. Money does not buy immunity from terrain, whether that terrain is desert, culture, technology, or human nature. Therefore, the most dangerous weapon is not the arrow. It is the story told inside the skull that says, "This cannot happen." You stand at the edge of that ancient field one last time. The dust settles on missing thousands. The captured vanish into distance, their names dissolving. The dead remain anonymous under open sky. But the lesson remains sharp enough to draw blood even now. So here is the legacy question, un-Googleable because it belongs only to the private courtroom inside your chest. When the shortcut with the smiling knife appears, when certainty feels cheaper than caution, when the world refuses to fight by your rules, do you tighten the march anyway? Or do you stop, swallow pride, and change before the arrows arrive?